Hello, my name is Jeffrey Yeom, and I attend the APU grad program here at APU for the Master's in Marriage and Family Therapy, and I'm also working here on staff in the Undergraduate Admissions Department. My story began when I was 15 years old. My father, he was watching over one of his friend's grocery stores in Portland, and soon after, maybe an hour later, after our family had gotten home while my dad's working at the store, a police officer shows up and says, "Your father has been shot and he is off to the ICU." So what happened was it was a shooting robbery, and my father had been shot and he was taken to the hospital, and at that point my whole life changed. Something that really got me through this moment was not only my faith but also my family. The community that I was a part of, the church community that I was a part of, friends from high school, the faculty and staff at my high school, all surrounded me in so much love and peace and prayer, and I think that was the biggest difference maker. Part of my story actually takes place after all the court meetings, our family having to meet face to face with the guy who shot my dad. It was a very painful experience, a very confusing time for me as a young 15-year-old. But throughout the process, it was also difficult seeing my father go through this. He was a very giving, very selfless man who helped with everybody's projects, just like even watching over that store. But to see him paralyzed from the neck down. But my story doesn't end there. There is a piece of forgiveness and grace that takes a huge portion of my life, and a couple of days after my dad was in the hospital, my mother sat with me and my sister and I, around the bed, and she pulled out this passage saying, in Matthew's, "We will always love and forgive those who hurt us, our enemies." And at first I didn't truly know what that meant, how to encompass that in my whole entire life. But as the years came, as I went throughout college, more and more was I able to share that story, be vulnerable with other people. And my father did pass away in August of 2008. And again, that changed my whole entire life. However, as I went on to college, like I had mentioned prior, finding healing, I was able to look into more what forgiveness and grace really means. I listened to a podcast and I was inspired by what forgiveness meant, and it wasn't until April of last year, so 2016, that I wrote a letter to the man who shot my dad. And in that letter I said, "The actions that you have taken have mysteriously put us on a path together, and we have to move forward in whatever regard." I told him that I loved him, that I forgave him, and that I consider a brother in Christ. And this is the way that I have been able to be present in my own life, but to also move forward. And I know that not everything will be perfectly in stone, but just to be able to extend that grace to this man meant, actually I didn't know the extent of what it would mean, but I told him that the grace and forgiveness that we receive from God is what we as Christians should be extending towards others. So I was having one of my worst days just a month later in May, and I look over and I see a letter in the mailbox, and I couldn't believe it. It was a response from the guy, and the letter had talked about how he wanted to matter in the eyes of others, and that he couldn't hold a job due to his addiction, so he was resorting to what he had been. So not only did he mention the addiction that he was going through, the struggles that he was going through, he began to explain what my letter had impacted him on. He mentioned that it was brave of somebody to extend forgiveness to somebody who doesn't deserve it. And he said specifically, "Thank you for affording me what others do not give to people like us." He talked about how he is now beginning to change the way that he conducts himself. He wants to live a life in a better way, and though that he does have a long sentence, he's not in there forever. Part of the story that I want to tell is that love, grace, and forgiveness exceeds all. It exceeds my understanding of how everyone says we should always ask for an eye for an eye. When people hurt us, we hurt them back. When somebody hurts you, hurts your family, we as society tell one another we want to demand the highest sentence for that individual. But what this story has brought into my life is a perspective of how we should consider listening to one another's stories, how we should extend love and forgiveness through Christ, because the way that I look at it is, if I continue to hold on to this burden, this heartache, it will only eat me up more and more, and it doesn't necessarily affect the other person. So I'm very thankful for this perspective that I can move forward with in my life, to begin to allow others to hear this story, to begin to restore what it means to live a Christ-like life, starting with forgiveness and love.